the streets, that political opponents are not put in jail, that you know, at least before a judge you are considered as an equal to everybody else. Is it that sufficient for accepting a political system of this sort? Or if the discriminations that go on in the country are as huge as having half of the population not entitled to vote, I mean, what is the difference? I mean, yes, you want to be tolerant, but you don't want to be a relativist. In fact, Cohen and Rawls are not relativists. I told you, they make a sharp distinction between a dictatorship and a decent people. They don't want to accept dictatorships. They say, as you know, the most we can do is to accept decent peoples. But when you allow for the possibility that the political process, that the people can be treated so differently in terms of their political rights, up to the point that women, for example, may be not given the right to vote, I think that, you know, you go dangerously close to either relativism or minimalism about human rights, which is another position, even less demanding than the Rawlsian and the Cohenian one, that says all human rights have to include is a protection against physical, in favor of physical integrity. So as long as you are not killed, or you don't starve, or what else? Yeah, I mean, you are not perhaps imprisoned in an arbitrary way. Even if you are given no civic and political rights, that's okay in terms of your human rights. So all that's minimalism, right? Even that you have these people, I mean, I'm not discussing these people here, but just for the sake of informing you, some people believe that all there should be in human rights are these very, very limited things, such as, are you starving? No. Okay. Have you been put in jail in an arbitrary way? No. Are you part of a ethnic community that is forcibly removed from its territory? That would be ethnic cleansing. No. Okay, then your human rights are respected. Yeah, but I can even protest against my government without some sanctions. Not to mention that I would like to participate in the political decision of my country. Yeah, too bad for you. It's okay, fine. I may even sympathize with you, but don't say that your human rights are violated, because according to me, who I am a minimalist, it's okay, your country is fine. I mean, there should be nobody allowed to criticize publicly what your country does to you, because your human rights are respected. You are not starving, you are not forcibly replaced in virtue of membership into a certain ethnic community, you are not under the threat of a genocide, you are not put in prison or treated without any fairness before a court law. That's fine. So Cohen and Rawls do not want to be minimalist. They want to introduce some civic and political rights in the list of human rights, but not democracy. Now, my reply to this is, okay, if you don't like minimalism, do you realize that by saying that you accept decent people, you are opening the door for the possibility that up to half of the population is discriminated in terms of political rights? Because this, if it's not minimalism, sounds like it. Okay. There are other reasons that Cohen puts forward in favor of his idea that democracy should not be considered as a human right, to which I replied, but I don't want to go into them. Let me stop at this point, and ask you whether you have questions, comments, criticisms. Yeah.
Professor, I have two doubts. First one, doesn't seem to you a bit contradictory, self-determination without democracy? Because for me, I can't possibly imagine a country which exercises its self-determination without being democratic. And
That's the first doubt.
Yeah, and the second one, how does civil disobedience relate to political innovation?
Okay. About the first one, you think it's contradictory to think of self-determination in a non-democratic
Which would be the criteria a country would have to exercise its self-determination without being democratic?
Okay, that's an excellent point. In fact, you will see that Cristiano makes precisely this point to say that actually Cohen is wrong. There should be a human right to democracy, just to jump a little bit ahead, for the reason you have in mind, that there must be at least one moment in which each citizen is given the chance to decide whether they want to be ruled by a democratic government or by a non-democratic one. If that is the case, Cristiano says, then democracy is more fundamental than self-determination. I mean, it's more fundamental in the sense that there must be a purely democratic moment, a flawless democratic moment, in which each is given the same power to decide which form of government they want. I guess that but then Cristiano says, you will see that in the second part of this lecture, okay, but that does not mean that we should consider necessarily non-democracies as violators of human rights. Why and how that is the case, I'll tell you in a minute. But for the moment, let me answer you just by saying that the intuition here is that there may be a political tradition, let's assume the Chinese case again, in which there is an authentic rejection of democracy, at least by a large sector of the population. It's like, not being interested in going to ballots every 5 years. And much of this depends on how you conceive of democracy, because there are two main ways in which you can conceive of democracy. One as an intrinsic value. Intrinsic being independently of whether democracy is efficient or not to produce good political results. It is intrinsically good because it's the only way in which you can publicly express the equality of all the people. So it's a sort of deontological point. It's not a question about consequences. Is democracy working well, produces, efficiency, and even people happy and so on and so forth? I don't care. It's a question of justice, independent of consequences. If you don't live in a democratic country, you are not treated as an equal person, and therefore there is injustice there. That's the intrinsic interpretation of democracy. Then there is the instrumental interpretation of democracy that says, okay, I don't know whether there is this intrinsic value. Democracy should be judged according to the results that it reaches. And again, I think I mentioned here the statistical evidence that says, one of the reasons why you want a human right to democracy is that we know as a fact that democracies are the best defenders of these basic human rights, so physical integrity, lack of arbitrary imprisonment, the fact that you don't risk to suffer a genocide, ethnic cleansing. Bueno de Mesquita, I mean, this famous book, Thinking Inside the Box, not outside of the box, in which he says, look, if we think that democracy is the bad system, maybe it's true. It's true because if you measure the capacity of democracies to respect basic human rights, they do much better than non-democratic forms of governance. So that would be an intrinsic approach, right? An instrumental approach, in which you say you have good reasons to believe that democracy produces good political results. Now, if you put aside the intrinsic interpretation of democracy and you focus on the instrumental one, then of course you allow for the possibility of two things. One, or maybe three. One, that these empirical studies are wrong, and that, you know, we may find out that in the end China is not that worse in terms of human rights protection than the United States. I'm not talking Germany. There is no comparison there because it's a more egalitarian society, there is a welfare state, it's a society that works well. So let's pick up, you know, a huge democracy, most ancient democracy in this world, the United States, that of course allows for huge inequalities, kind of death of infants rate pretty high, and so on and so forth. I mean, some people may think, and some people in China do think, that their system is not worse than the American system. So, you know, they might say, democracy, yeah, maybe. I mean, but you have to show me that the political results that democracy has are better than, for example, the huge removal of poverty that happened since Deng Xiaoping opened to the market in China. I mean, no, we like this system much better. We want political leaders that are selected. Yes, sure, we want free market, but we don't want election. We want capitalism, but we don't want democracy. So why should we be forced to choose a system that we don't want? So the real question there is what you do if there is a minority of people there that wants democracy. That's the real philosophical paradox. Because at that point you have to choose whether the value of self-determination of the people, the Chinese people, is stronger than the value of respecting the rights of that minority. And at that point is really the difference between a state-centered view of justice, in which countries are still political entities with moral significance, and as long as the majority of a country, within a country, decides that this is the way in which you should go, it's difficult from outside to criticize this decision, or whether you have a cosmopolitan approach, in which you say, you know, for me states are just conventions, what matters are the rights of the individuals. And at that point, if there are individuals, even if they are a minority within that country that says, no, I don't want to be discriminated, I want to, you know, participate in equal footing in the decision of my government, then you are kind of forced to say, no, I mean, there should be a human right to democracy. So, you see, all these things are connected with one another, but that's why the discussion is, at least to me, interesting, because it's not straightforward one way or the other.
Just to add,
yeah,
I'm thinking on the South Africa case during the apartheid,
yeah,
Palestine and Israel,
yes,
and India, with the system of
castes. Okay, what do you mean with these examples?
If they fit properly in which of these cases
I see. Now, you know, one interesting thing about roles decent peoples, it's very hard to find one in the world. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about them, and I still have few difficulties because it really looks like that there is no middle way in between. But maybe I'm too harsh. But now South Africa. South Africa. I mean, self-determination in favor of apartheid. I mean, no. I mean, I don't think that Rhodes would consider South Africa of 20 years ago as a decent state, because there, well, in a sense, blacks had the right to protest against the government to a certain extent, and there were. So you might say, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. I never thought about it. But I guess that the intuition of Rhodes and Cohen there is that there must be a political. I mean, what they have in mind is Islamic states, basically, not the state, not South Africa. So the idea in which a religion tells you what the law of the state should be, and this religion, or a certain interpretation of this religion, tells you that women should not be part of the political life of the society, that should be given less credit, so on. So that's what they have in mind. So in the case of South Africa, to be charitable to Rhodes and Cohen, they would say, look, there is really no political tradition or no religion that justifies the decision that a minority of whites should rule over a majority of blacks, basically. So Palestine in Israel is extremely interesting, because there again you have the contrast between state-centered and cosmopolitan approach. Okay, to a certain extent there is not even the need to go to this contrast between state-centered conception of global justice and cosmopolitan conception of global justice, because sometimes you might say Palestinians are treated below the threshold even of minimalism. The situation there is complex, but I think there is ground to say that there are immense human rights violations, even if you have the most prudent and the most shortened list of human rights you may think of. But in terms of what should the international community do to help Palestinians to have their own state, then that is a tricky business, because of course it's like, what should the international community do? Well, to a certain extent with Catalonia. You know, there was this independence, this movement of a part of Spain that says, no, we want to secede, Puigdemont, all that stuff that happened, well, recently, 6 months ago, something like that, after the election, with another paradox of democracy, the election that put the separatist party as the majoritarian party in that region of Spain, with a program that say, if we win the election, we are going to secede. You know, Alan Buchanan, a guy that I mentioned before as a representative of the political school, started his career thinking about these problems. What does it mean to have a right to self-determination? Who is the self there? Is the self a minority within a state, a legitimate self that can say, okay, I'm going to secede? Why? Because I am a group. We decided that we no longer want to be part of this state. I mean, most people think that there is not even human right, but there is no right of this sort. You have a right to autonomy. You have a right to, kind of, if you show that there is a willingness to organize your life in a specific way, at most you have a right to a bigger degree of autonomy from the central government, which is not the same thing as the right to secede. But maybe a cosmopolitan would tell you, no. There is actually a right to secede. To the extent in which a region within a state wants to secede, the rights of the individuals in that region should have priority over the rights of the rest of the country that may have an interest in keeping you inside. Often the ones who want to succeed are the rich ones, you know, like 20 years in Italy with the now very strong Lega, which used to be called Lega Nord, not accidentally. They wanted to secede from the rest of Italy because it's the richest part of Italy. Now they have a different program because they no longer want to secede, they want to make sure that immigrants from Africa don't come to our shores. So they have moved the Maginot Line a little bit south, no longer to Florence, but you know, to Pantelleria, so the island in front of Africa still belongs to Italy. Anyway, okay, so the second question you had was political obligation and
Civil disobedience.
civil disobedience. Well, I think you have in mind why Rawls and Cohen are so keen on making sure that people keep a right to disobedience. No, sorry. Now I understand. Okay. Well, interestingly, Rawls has a whole part of the theory of justice devoted to civil disobedience, because being a liberal thinker, someone who believes in the authority of the state, I mean, once the law is properly passed and is within constitutional limits, he tends to think you have to obey. So, what is the threshold below which you are? I mean, that's a huge theme, and one of the things that human rights do often is precisely to give you an authorization to disobey, because if the government says, well, you know what, there is this group of Jews that are ruining our economy, why don't we start, you know, getting rid of them in such a way that our problems will be solved? You know, the famous Eichmann case. I mean, Hannah Arendt made this, you know, perhaps, made this famous example of Eichmann, the banality of evil. I mean, this guy, Eichmann, was a Nazi official, was found, kidnapped by the M16, so the Israeli Secret Service, brought to Jerusalem, trialed there, and sentenced to death. And his line of defense, of course, was, I was ordered by higher authority to act the way I did. And of course the Israeli government was not impressed by this line of defense. But in a sense, Eichmann was right. I mean, there were, you know, orders that lower Nazi officials were supposed to obey. Now, what are the boundaries of civil disobedience? I mean, it's a huge theme, and I'm afraid I cannot, you know, give you a satisfactory answer. But the thing I would say is that one of the reasons why it's important to have a fairly clear, well-established, thought-out conception of human rights is that it's, among other things, one of the point of reference you want to have if you want to decide to disobey your government. So the criteria would be, if the government passes laws that imply directly or indirectly a huge violation of human rights, I am entitled to disobey. Maybe I'm not entitled to use violence against the government, but I'm entitled to disobey in a pacific manner. Entitled and perhaps obliged. So you have.
Yeah. Can I go back to Waldo?
Waldo, sure.
Yeah. I have two questions, I think, but before that, since you asked for help to understand, why dignity is a rank and not a value, I was checking here because this book you mentioned, has a very interesting structure. You have the paper and a replica, and I was looking what the
John Simmons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you know about this?
Yeah, I do.
He says yes. He says that Waldron thinks that dignity is a rank and not a value, because value here would be something like a consequentialist approach, taking something as a value, and then even if you are saying that some consequentialists can justify human rights,
Can
justify human rights.
justify.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is also true that for a consequentialist, you could violate one right here and now to prevent further bigger violations, for instance, and that is something that the ontological approach would not be
Very happy with.
happy about. Yeah. So I think that the explanation could be this: that why not value? Yeah.
Right.
Because then it's going to be a kind of
So because you want to be able to make exchange between rights. So your point, or Simon's point in your
Okay.
in your reading is that Waldron resists to think of dignity in terms of a value, because value is usually a deontological.
I know, a consequentialist.
Okay, but then that would be.
This is Simmons, just Simmons. And
Right.
I agree that it's easier, let's say, to accept violations of rights, and that's why Waldron was a little bit careful
Well,
about
to
it. But
start-
I have two questions. Now, just to put attention that the explanation Simmons gives is this one. So my two questions about run, dignity as a run, makes sense. Waldron, I think you pointed out, I was doing my homework reading also the Waldron. It's a very good statement.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to get rid of the notion of dignity, and he makes the point that it's a rank, not a value. And since you are an expert in Kant, I have two questions about this. It seems like a very Kantian idea also to say that dignity is just a rank. And here, then my question is, do you accept the kind of meta-ethical interpretation I think that Oliver Sacks does about this concept in the Kantian, let's say, ethics? I don't remember the guy who has a different, more realistic, let's say, interpretation that criticizing this anti-realistic approach to dignity that Oliver Sacks has, which says that dignity is a property of the rational being, independent of what we human beings think about. So the questions are around, let's say, this meta-ethical interpretation of the notion of dignity in Kant ethics.
Right.
If we agree with Oliver Sacks, I think we can come very close to what Waldron is saying.
No, I disagree completely with Oliver Sacks' interpretation of Kant, because I think that the most straightforward and most faithful interpretation of the notion of dignity in Kant's text goes as follows. We are demonstrably free agents, and by free means autonomous agents. This is an ontological property that we have. It's not a meta-ethical or a linguistic way in which this is what we are. I mean, you can believe or not believe the arguments that Kant has in the groundwork or in the second critique to show that that is the case, but that's what Kant thinks. Now, from this ontological property follows a value, not a rank, follows the worth of humanity. The worth of humanity is precisely the fact that it's the only species that is capable of moral behavior. Period. That's a value, it's not a rank. I mean, at least you have to concede that it's an attractive philosophical position, because it's a clear one. Or at least it's not something, it's not a position that begs the question, because by saying that dignity is a rank, at least to my less sophisticated mind than Waldron's for sure, sounds a little bit like question begging. I mean, okay, it's a rank. What does it mean it's a rank? It means that it's a short name for a number of rights that you are given. But what I'm interested in is to understand whether the fact that these rights are given to me is justified. I mean, were priests in the medieval Europe given a certain number of rights justified in being given these rights? Yes or no? Were noble people in medieval Europe justified in being given more rights than normal? That's the foundational question. I mean, if you tell me that that dignity is a rank, at least when he says those things that I reported about the fourth model, at least it attracts my attention because, you know, there is a sense in which you can have an interpretation of human dignity as making sense of human rights, but at the same time doing some work to let us understand human rights better. Because by having this kind of unifying function, you may think that it's going to help you in, I don't know, for example, excluding a human right to holiday with pay, because even if you are not allowed to go on holiday with pay, it's very hard to say that your dignity is not respected, or maybe not. I mean, it gives you, you know, a direction in which you have to go to make a decision whether you want to have that right included or excluded. But merely saying that dignity is a rank doesn't really help me in any way. So that's why I think I don't understand, because if Paul Waldron is saying that, I mean, what I understand about his approach is that he comes from jurisprudence, so he has this approach of, you know, positive rights are what should we start with, and he has this further idea that the language of right, also from an historical point of view, comes before the language of dignity, which I think is itself questionable, because as I said, there is wonderful philosophical reflection on dignity way before the French Declaration, the Bill of Rights, even before the Magna Carta in a certain sense, because Cicero, Seneca, these Latin philosophers, you know, said a lot of interesting things about the dignity of the human being. So, not to mention, of course, Pico da Mirandola, the Dignitate Hominis. So, I don't know.
Okay, I think I agree. I have a more realistic interpretation of Kant's notion of dignity. My second question is about democracy.
Right.
What kind of democracy are we talking about?
Yeah.
Representative democracy, direct democracy, agonistic democracy, deliberative, participative democracy.
No,
Could you
yeah,
say
I should
something
have.
about that?
I should have clarified that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, by democracy in this debate, pretty much we mean a political system that presupposes selection of leaders through elections open to each adult in the society, independently of religion, gender, or any other. So it's a very minimalistic interpretation of democracy, in which basically you are no longer in a democratic government if you allow some a priori discrimination among the population. So there must be no a priori way in which you attribute certain rights to some people but not to others. That's all and possibility to compete for power. That's all there is within this very basic conception of democracy. So that you can replace democracy with thinking with non-discrimination. That's all. The central value is that one. because you have discrimination in decent peoples, discrimination in terms of political rights. If there were no discrimination in some area of rights, you would be in a democracy, basically. So you can really talk about non-discrimination and nothing essential would be left out, except the fact that if you talk about democracy, you also have the idea that you can compete for power. I mean, it's election of government, of leaders through competition among parties. Okay, I think it's a good time to make a break, and then we'll come back with Cristiano.